Hey guys, welcome back to Real Housewives Recaps. You guys, I'm so excited. I have a surprise. It was probably already spoiled by the title. So many of you have talked about Grace and Frankie, and so guess what? Today we're talking Grace and Frankie. I love that show. I've watched it since the beginning. I think it's fabulous, so hilarious, and I decided as a treat, let's go back and talk about it. So we're going to start with the first episode, and if you guys are into it, we'll see if we can keep going here and there. I think it'll be a fun addition. But you guys, I'm so excited to be here and be talking about this. The whole thing is and just like that, as we know, is a total shit show that doesn't know how to show women of a certain age. But Grace and Frankie gets it right. As we know, Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin are in their 80s. And we get to see like the fun youthfulness side with some of the aches and pains that people actually experience. So great show. I'm excited to dive in. Let's talk about it. Before we jump into it, I did want to let you know I have a Patreon now, so check that out. Patreon.com/Real Housewives Recap, and you'll find my logo and you'll find us. So take a look at that, see if it works out. The first episode's free. You can watch it here on YouTube. After that, you can check them out on Patreon. We're doing the original Sex and the City series. So right off the bat, we have this fabulous opening. I loved it. I just remember the first time I saw it, I just thought it was such a fantastic way of kind of setting things up and letting us know what we were in for. And I like the music. I like the visuals. I think it's a great way of opening the show. It just adds to the funness of the show. So you guys, this first episode is called The End. And we see Frankie is waiting at the restaurant. Frankie, of course, played by Lily Tomlin. Love her. I need Dolly Parton to be on this show at some point. That's another topic. Okay, so Grace arrives, played by Jane Fonda, and says, ugh, they're here. So immediately we start to notice the differences between Frankie and Grace. Frankie is texting somebody saying, call at 9 and say the cat has a seizure. So clearly these two are not overly fond of each other. So they kiss hello and say their pleasantries and say that they've been looking forward to this. And hey, the guys aren't here yet. And we see Grace being uptight. She's sending the bread away. I'm thinking, who does that? I would dive face first into that bread. So they both think that the guys called this dinner to announce their retirement. Just then, we see them arrive. So, of course, Grace is married to Robert, and Frankie is married to Saul. So the guys arrive, and Grace whispers immediately to Robert, no appetizers, no dessert, meaning let's get this dinner over with. They enjoy this huge seafood dinner. My husband's super into seafood, so he was like dying over the scene. He kept saying it looks delicious. I think it's funny that that's what he was focused on during the scene. Robert and Saul say they have something they want to talk about. The girls kind of look at each other knowingly. So, of course, they're assuming that they're announcing their retirement. Saul says it's a very exciting chapter in the book of life. And Frankie says, yeah, Saul is saying Frankie says change is good. Grace is like, get to the point, guys. And Robert says, okay, I'll do this. And he just turns to her and says, I'm leaving you. And says to Frankie, and he's leaving you. So, of course, they are completely stunned. And you guys, I just remember the first time I watched this, and even rewatching it, it was just a hell of a way to start a show, right? So they're completely stunned because how could you not be? Grace's first reaction is, who is she? And Robert has to explain, no, it's not what you think. It's a he, and he is Saul. So Frankie says, you're gay, and this is who you're gay with? And Saul says, it's who I'm in love with. How long has it been going on? You guys, it's been going on for 20 years. So it's just crazy. We find out they do want to get married, and Grace says, this is why you brought us here, so we wouldn't make a scene. You're spineless chicken shit. Throws seafood at him, and Frankie's having trouble breathing. Okay, so we're at the house, right? And things are tense. Grace walks off. Saul says, I'm sorry to Frankie. I didn't know how to handle this. And how do I tell the woman of 40 years that I don't want to be with her? And she says, you write out the clock. She tells him to sleep in the den. And then we go back to Grace. And this, I do remember. Again, it's a very memorable scene of, this show is full of laughs, but there's also these serious moments in it. So we see her staring at herself in the mirror and taking off her the things that she, would normally do, her makeup, her lashes, her hairpiece, things like that. And it's just an intense scene. So Robert says, "Can I please talk?" And she says, "Nope, talking is not your forte." And he says, "I never thought you'd be this upset. I thought you'd be relieved." So it kind of lets us know how their marriage has been over the last however many years. Saul's on the couch. Frankie comes out. She climbs in bed with him. So the next day, we see the kids coming over. So, again, to keep it straight. So Frankie and Saul have Bud and Coyote. And Grace and Robert have Mallory and Brianna. So Bud and Coyote come over, and Coyote thinks it's an intervention because he's struggles with addiction. He's been 90 days clean. Then we flash back between them and Grace and Robert. Grace says that Robert says he's going to cancel the kids coming over, and she says, "Absolutely not. They know something's up. Try to be straight for one more brunch." So this was one of my favorite scenes. So at Grace and Robert's, Mallory and Brianna come in, and they just start yelling, "What the F?" So Bud called them and gave them a heads up. They walk in, and they say, "Dad, you're gay?" And Grace is crying. Mallory says, "We'll find you group therapy. We'll go to Palm Springs." And they're hugging her and being very supportive. And Brianna, who was played by Diane Raphael, she offers her a Valium. And Grace says, "How about two?" So at Frankie's, they're telling her 3 months ago, Coyote was a mess, but he's cleaned his life up now. And he says, "I'm okay because of you. You've got this." And she says, I've got to get out of here. So again, back to Grace's house, a delivery arrives. The delivery man is super nice and says, "Thank you, man. Have a great day." And she says, "F you." Like, she's just over it all. She opens this box, and I totally forgot about this. There's a chair with Ryan Gosling's face on it. And she takes it up to Robert, and he says, "It's a joke between me and Saul." And she says, "Now you get a sense of humor? I gotta get out of this house. I never really liked this house. I gotta go to the beach." So she packs up her things, and what's funny is we do see her take the Ryan Gosling chair, which I kind of love. She said, "If anybody's going to be sitting on Ryan Gosling's face, it's me." So Frankie, we see her at the liquor store. She's getting junk food and ice cream and liquor and all the stuff you would need to deal with something like this. Grace, on the other hand, sees herself on a hair care box, and which is funny because she actually does, or I don't know if she still does, but I remember she used to be on hair care boxes and modeled for all sorts of things. Okay, so back to Frankie. She says, "Excuse me, sir, what brand would you smoke if your husband was gay for 20 years? And he says, "Lucky." So she gets those, heads back to the house. Frankie's smoking. She's making an ice cream. She's pouring Jameson whiskey on it. And it just, again, cracking me up. I love Frankie. I just find her so funny throughout the series. This is how she's choosing to deal with this. So when she's in the freezer putting away her ice cream, she finds a bag says "Property of Frankie." So we find out this is peyote tea. It's going to propel her on her vision quest to find tranquility and peace. She says, "I walk this path alone." She's making a recording because she's worried she's going to be by herself. She wants her kids to see that she's okay. She says that the tea can be bitter, but if your heart is pure, the bitterness will not be tasted. She takes a sip and says, "Holy shit, that's bad. Apparently I have purification still to do." So Grace has also arrived at the beach house. She hears Frankie chanting and says, "What are you doing here? I made Robert promise you'd never be here at the same time." She begs Frankie to go somewhere else, and so we find out basically this is a joint beach house, right, that both couples had gone into together, that it was something that Robert convinced Grace to go in on because it was a great business opportunity, basically. But we find out that's not what they used it for. Apparently, Robert and Saul were meeting up at the beach house. On a side note, I am obsessed with this beach house. Every time it's on the screen, I'm staring at everything. I love the colors. I love the way it's decorated. I love everything about this house. It's gorgeous. Okay, so Grace has thrown Frankie out, essentially. Not, kind of. She kind of is like, "I need to be alone." Frankie takes a bunch of stuff and goes out to the beach. Meanwhile, Grace calls Robert, and Robert pretends like he's not with Saul, but they are together. And she says, I get the beach house. You owe this to me. You're my partner, and you've been boinking your law partner for 20 years. I want this house. I want to be sure that this house is mine. So they hang up, and we see him telling Saul what's going down. He says, I know you feel guilty, Saul. Saul says it makes it worse because he's so happy. So we actually get a touching moment between the two of them to see that they genuinely are in love and that they are excited to be married and that they are truly happy. Okay, Frankie, meanwhile, she found the tea. It's peyote tea. She'd been drinking that on the beach, and you guys, I was laughing so hard. If you pay attention closely, she's talking to people that aren't there. She says it's not kicking in, but then she's talking to people. She throws her back out. She ends up having to call Grace. She's in back spasm and can't move. She says she's in the desert, but there's water there because she's just, I can't say too much drug stuff, but, she's the opposite of low. She gives Grace a sip of tea. Grace says this is the worst tea I've ever had, doesn't realize that it's peyote. And she says, you should brace yourself for light vomiting, followed by life-altering hallucinations. Okay, so the next morning, they've talked some. They're still crying, and Grace is mad. Frankie says she's heartbroken, and they just have a nice evening together where they've been talking to non-existent people. Frankie says that she felt like things were off and that she ignored them. Grace says that she went into Robert's study yesterday for the first time in years, and she just didn't even realize it was right in front of her face. It was right there the whole time, and she missed it. So we see it again. This is where they're starting to bond over this shared, heartbreak, and they walk off together. And Frankie says that she has half the beach in her vagina. Back at the house, they sit together. Frankie hands Grace Saul's Cialis pills, and I thought that was a really funny touch. She stole them so that way she could punish the guys a little bit. Grace laughs and says that she peed on Ryan Gosling a little bit, and then they end the episode by saying, now what? And you guys, I gotta say, for a pilot episode, it's so good. We get introduced to so many interesting storylines. We meet these women, we learn the differences, we learn what makes them similar. It's fantastic. The writing, everything about it. I love it. So if you haven't watched Grace and Frankie, go watch it. It's on Netflix. It's fantastic. If you have watched it, if you're into these recaps, please let me know in the comments and we will keep going because you know what? I had so much fun covering that. I really did. It's fun to rewatch it. It's fun to go back through this and think about all the feelings I felt the first time I watched it. And it's just a great show. It's just really well written and a lot of fun. So if you're into it, please let me know. And thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope you have a fantastic day. And you better believe I will be back very soon because I'm obsessed and I put out 1 million videos. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you're into it, check out my Patreon because it really does help support the channel. If you're not, that's cool. I put out 1 million videos. Check me out here. Thank you guys so much. Every thumbs up helps. Every comment helps. Hitting that subscribe button helps. Telling your friends helps. I appreciate every single one of you, and I will talk to you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.